So there were two guys who met at an interview applying for the same job. There was Chaim Yankel from Chelm and Mr. Johnson. And the interviewer said that the interview was going to be a written test. They both filled in their answers. And when the interviewer was over, the interviewer said, "Okay, I'm sorry. We are going to be hiring Mr. Johnson." So Chaim Yankel says, "Why? We both got the same amount of questions right. There were 10 questions. We both got 9 questions right. Why are you hiring him?" And this new boss is like, "I'm so sorry. We decided to hire Mr. Johnson." So Chaim Yankel gets angry. He's like, "What are you, an anti-Semite? Why aren't you hiring me? We got the same amount of answers right. I'm just as qualified. What do you have against me?" So the interviewer says, "Actually, I'm not hiring Mr. Johnson because of the answers that you got right. I'm hiring him because of the answers that you got wrong." So Chaim Yankel's like, "I mean, if it's incorrect, it's incorrect. Who cares? Like, what difference is it?" So this new manager says, "Well, for question number 5, Mr. Johnson wrote, 'I don't know.' And for question number 5, you wrote, 'I don't either.'" While that's all nice and good on the interview, for one guy to say, "I don't know," and for the other guy to give away that he's cheating by saying, "I don't either," in life, there actually are sometimes questions that we don't know the answer to. And whenever I'm speaking to students and they're asking certain questions about why certain tragedies have to happen or different difficult situations in life, and they say, "Why does it have to happen?" My answer is actually, I don't know either. And we probably will never know why it happened and why people have to suffer and struggle, and it should bother us. The question really isn't why, but how. What can I do when I'm faced with a challenge, a physical challenge, something that's hard for me, something that's painful, traumatic? What are some tools? What is the perspective that I could look at? Because it really feels bad. It doesn't feel like everything that comes from Hashem is good. It feels really bad. That's physical challenges. But sometimes we're faced not necessarily with physical challenges, but spiritual challenges. And I'll hear this from the teens as well. They could be struggling with something that they're very embarrassed of, ashamed, a bad habit, questions, doubts. And there's this certain feeling of like, I'm a failure if I'm struggling with this. Why is it so hard for me to do what's so easy for everyone else? It's so much harder for me to get out of bed and daven and just be a from person and human. And there, again, there's the why. Not just physically when someone is challenged, but spiritually. And the truth is, I don't know either. But in this maamar that we're going to learn today, we're going to try to get a perspective of not why, but how. How can I look at my life when I get a challenge that is not only empowering, but that's actually healing? So I hope you join me today by learning this maamar inside. The maamar is from Likutei Torah, Vayas Maisha Nachas Nachashas, and I'm going to be reading some of it inside. I learned it by using Chassidus Mevuaris, which I find extremely enlightening and helpful and gives a lot more background and, makes it easier to learn this maamar, and I hope you'll join me. So, this maamar starts off with a question. The Yidden were punished in the Midbar by snakes. And these snakes actually got them very sick. And what does Hashem tell Moshe? What does he send them in order to heal them? Hashem told him, make a copper snake and put it on a stick. And all the Jews who got hurt from this poisonous snake and were now ill should look up at this copper snake And that's what's going to heal them. And the maamar starts off saying, what's going on here? First of all, why a snake? Why a copper snake? And what's happening here? They were bit by a snake, so they look up by a snake. And the second question is, normally, when something happens, we know we daven. Someone was hurt, we say tehillim. And when someone davens, they're supposed to look down at their siddur, focus, and concentrate. Why are we looking up here? What's the up? What are we looking at? So Vayas Moshe Nachash Nachashas Veisimeu al Anes. Moshe put this copper snake on a tall pole. V'haya im nashach ha-nachash. Tongue twister for you. As ish v'hibit al nachash ha-nachashas v'chai. You look up at that copper snake, and that's what's going to keep you alive. And the Isa b'Mishnah, we explain al zeh, bizman she'Yisrael mistaken klape maila, when you look up, umishabden es libam lavim shebashamayim, you're looking up to really take your heart and nullify it towards Hashem. You're looking up at Hashem. And we're just wondering, the kasha lama le lenachash klal, why do we need this whole copper snake thing? If it's all about Hashem, tell them to do tshuva for their sin, the reason why they got punished in the first place. Why the snake? Right? Why? Why do we need the snake? And why klape maila? Right? What's this idea? That your eyes should be concentrated and focused rather than looking upwards. And if you follow along, you'll see I'm not reading everything, but I'm taking the main points. So the maamar says, in order to understand this snake story, and in order to understand how we deal with challenges, we want to really dive deep and understand life. We want to understand life and how what are the dynamics of all these challenges that we face, whether it's a plague or anything in our personal life, and how we overcome it. I have news for you. The neshama doesn't either want those challenges. Whether it's physical challenges, things that are really hard in life, or it's spiritual challenges, things that you're really, really, really struggling and feel so much shame and pain about that it's so many years and you're still struggling, the neshama was much happier staying up in Hashem, up by Hashem. The neshama was basking in the light in Gan Eden. The neshama is not thrilled to come here. So what's the purpose of creation? And in typical Hasidic fashion, we're diving so deep. We're saying, in order to understand something that on the surface is just a question, I want you to understand the deepest truth, and that will manifest and really, really help and explain all the details of your life. So, in Yeniridus and Hashem ba'ayim haza, ki ikar tachlisai ledavik b'kainei ba'ava yira. The purpose here is to cleave to Hashem with ava and yira, and really, the neshama doesn't understand why it can't just do that up there. The ikar hadvekesu b'tefila, and the main time during the day where we cleave to Hashem, where we really strengthen our connection with Hashem, is during davening. So we're getting closer to Hashem during davening. So somehow davening is going to be this key to understanding the rest of our lives. The maamar says something very interesting. Before the neshama came down here, and even once it passes, it has a much more deep and real connection to Hashem. The Avan Yira, think about how much Avan Yira you have on a day-to-day basis. It's probably very limited. You're probably busy, you probably have a job, you probably have a lot of responsibilities, running, hectic, school, work, life, family, friends. So it actually seems that it's not ideal for the neshama to be down here. The body doesn't give it the time, effort, and everything it needs in order to serve Hashem properly. So what's the point of the neshama coming down here? The adrab, if anything, the opposite. Because it's such a physical thing, the body, it's going to force the neshama to engage in something it doesn't naturally appreciate. The neshama understands the currency of godliness. It loves God. It has all of God. The currency of the soul is spirituality. You're getting the neshama to never be dragged along to eat food, to become a foodie, to enjoy pleasures, to go on vacations, to enjoy fine clothing, has to get excited by color palettes, by whatnot. it actually doesn't only seem to further the agenda of getting close to Hashem, but if anything, it seems to take the soul a step back. After neshama ain't right, so the neshama is not interested in any of this. Right? The source of the neshama is Hashem. The neshama's desire is godliness. So what's it doing here? What's the neshama doing here? So that's all the beginning where the Alter Rebbe builds up this question of, we start off with the snake, we say we have to dive in and understand life, and now we're going to start the explanation. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain. You want to know what the purpose of all of this is? You want to know what's happening here? What's happening here is that there's two different stages or points of where the soul is and everything that's happening. There's the source of everything, the way it is, up by God before creation. And then there's the way, like, it actually comes out. You know, sometimes you have an idea and then other people implement it and you're like, oh yeah, no, that's not what I had in mind. Or you made a recipe and, you know, you have these perfectly shaped hamantashen, and after it goes through a process in the oven, they are all open and they're flopped, and you're like, those weren't the hamantashen I baked. Because there's a difference between before the process and after the process, or what you had in mind and how it came out. Or even if you had the intention of the way, you know, it should come out, you knew that your hamantashen were flopped, it's still different. Because sometimes what it looks like, and I just want to make sure that the mashal that I use is not misunderstood. Not that Chas v'Shalom God had an intention for it to come out a different way. Hashem knew exactly what he was doing. But sometimes a process changes something that it looks very different from what it originally started off at. And the Alter Rebbe says, I want you to know that when we say everything is good, what we mean is the source of everything is God. The source of everything is good. But you're right, to your eyes and your human experience, it might not look good. So that's actually very validating. Oh, the source is good. My senses cannot comprehend it as good. And the Alter Rebbe gives a mashal. And remember, we're talking about two parallel things here. We're talking about physical challenges and spiritual challenges. And sometimes it's easier to understand it from a spiritual perspective, and then we could apply it to a physical perspective. And the Alter Rebbe gives a very famous mashal of the Zaina. A king really wants to test his son to see how loyal he is. So he comes up with a plan that's really like a form of counter pressure. He wants to prove how loyal and strong and moral his son is, so he hires a Zaina to test his son. It looks bad. It looks like a test. But really, what is the king's intention? The king's intention is to show how moral he is. And not just that. The Zaina herself doesn't want the king's son to succumb to all her efforts at seducing him. So this is giving us the beginning of understanding that every spiritual challenge that we have, it might not be fun. We might not appreciate it. But it's a form of counter pressure to make us stronger. This is what the neshama is here to do. The neshama is here to work with the guf. The neshama is here to reveal godliness here. To show how moral, how close. This is what Hashem's taiva is. When you recognize it, the things that look like dinim, that look like negative things, get sweetened when you recognize their source. Oh, I really want to lie. I really want to steal. I really want to get angry. I really want to do anything that's usher according to Torah. I'm really, really struggling. Something, a relationship that's not okay. Anything that I shouldn't be doing. Counter pressure. A din, something that seems negative. If I recognize that this is coming from Hashem to strengthen me, and I recognize the source of it, that sweetens it for me and actually gives me the ability to overcome it. Shekol Ritzaina, I'm reading about the Zaina's desire. V'chefza shalai l'tzayis Isa doesn't want the king's son to give in. If anything, she wants to be appreciated by the king. She wants the son not to give in to her. And that's how we could understand actually a contradiction. It says, there's a maamar about the Satan, that the Satan and Pnina L'shem Shemayim Niskavnu, that really mean things for L'shem Shemayim. Story of Pnina is that she would tease Chana in Navi. And the Mefarshim explains she only teased Chana about not having children, so that she meant it L'shem Shemayim, so Chana would be in more pain and ask for Hashem, and Hashem would give her a child. And the Satan also means it L'shem Shemayim. He really is trying to tease us, but only for the sake of Hashem. And there's another part, right? B'makam acher it says that the Satan really, 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 really cares to get us into trouble. Nasav eina b'mikdash rishon ve'achriva. He just wants to destroy it. And the Alter Rebbe explains, are we talking about the source, or are we talking about it the way it looks down here? Because it looks very different. In truth, the source is that it's all good. When it comes down here, it doesn't look so pretty to us. It looks very, very, very messy. And it feels very messy, and we experience it as very messy. But if we could remember the source, that will empower us, that will sweeten it, and that will also help us overcome. And this is a truth that is not just for spiritual challenges, it's also physical challenges. The same way with spiritual challenges, as we mentioned before, what could help me is if I know, like, there's just this thing inside of me that's lying to me. It's convincing me that if I don't act out on this specific Avera, I'm not going to be able to handle it. I'm going to die unless I act or say or do this thing. Oh, its source is in holiness, and it's just a test from Hashem. That itself helps me. Same thing. If somebody has a physical challenge, Rahman al-Islan, Yachshav, he should think, yes, it looks to his eyes like it's bad, but in the source, it's not bad. But the source is good, and it's just coming as a test. Because no bad comes from Hashem. Only Taiv Gamor. It's not understood because it can't come down in this low level. So how does it help? How does it help for me to think about this? How does it help for me to think that the source is God and good? Actually, that itself, the thought that this is coming from Hashem, has the power to change it and make it good, b'tayv hanira v'nigla, that it should be obvious good. And the time that we do this is during davening. We sit during davening and we process and we say everything is good and everything comes from Hashem. So the famous example that we know of is Nachum Ish Gamzu, where he was sent on a mission to bring gold and treasures to the emperor. And it was stolen from him. And he was left with sand. And what did he say? This is good. What does it mean it's good? Everything that comes from Hashem is good. Down here, it looks bad. And here's the key. By recognizing that everything that comes from Hashem is good, you actually impact and change it so that it should actually be good. That's the unbelievable thing. You actually change it. Like the story of Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa. The story of Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa is that his daughter, by mistake, used vinegar instead of oil. And Rabbi Chanina ben Daisa said that the same one that said that oil could actually make vinegar light. What happened? He went to the source. The source is God. The source is Hashem. When you go back to the source, then the same way it went through a process and ended one way, it can go through a process and end another way. When we recognize that everything is just a test, when we recognize that everything is might not look to our eyes the way we like it, but originally comes from Hashem, we actually have the best chance of changing it to be Taiva Niravan Nikla. Right? It says that that's what happened with Nachum Ish Gamzu. Heviu l'malei el sharsham l'makayim ayin. The source of everything, before it went through Seder Shtal Shalos, before it took on a new form. well, then you could just go back to the original. If you're going back to the original, once you go back to the original, it could come out in a different process. You could shape things differently. Things could look very, very different. You're just going back to the original, where it's still malleable and you can still change things around. Davening is where this all happens. Davening is when we sit and we contemplate and we think about, and as we're saying the words, Hamachadash Betuvai B'chayim Tamid, davening is a time where I think, oh, there's nothing that has any independent ability to be anything in this world. Davening is when I say, this is where I recognize everything is coming from Hashem. That will spill over into the rest of the day. That will spill over into the time when I'm struggling physically or spiritually and say, oh, reminder, everything is coming from Hashem. And it's interesting because davening too has been a process. We didn't always have formal davening. In the time of the first Beis HaMikdash, they didn't have formal davening. They just did kabranais. So why did we start to have formal davening in order to really sit down and contemplate these ideas? So the Alter Rebbe explains with a mashal. If there is silver that's mixed with a lot of impurities, in order to get the silver to be clean and without any of these impurities, the silversmiths of old, they would put on heat, put on a fire, and that fire would separate the good from the impurities. I mean, I also learned this in real life with chicken soup, right? When you take the water and you put the chicken in and you boil it, then the scum of the chicken rises. It separates from the chicken. The Alter Rebbe was leading us and saying, davening is not just davening. Davening is life. Davening is recognizing that everything comes from Hashem. Every physical thing, every challenge, every spiritual, physical challenge is sourced in Hashem. And when I recognize that, that actually has a power to change the outcome and the way I see it down here. And we started saying that davening actually was not always a formal prayer the way we know it today. The times of the Beis HaMikdash, in the first Beis HaMikdash, they didn't have formal prayer, and at the second Beis HaMikdash they started, and as they went further and further, more tefillas were established and added. The reason is because the more Yidden were in Galus, and the more we've adopted foreign perspectives, attitudes, things that might have stuck to us, the more we need to counteract that with a fire, with a passion. And that's what davening is. Davening is that passion. Davening is that fire. Davening is the few moments in a day when I'm like, everything really does come from Hashem. And that helps me the rest of the day. So in order to do this essential avodah, in order that my whole day should be permeated with this idea of everything that's happening, whether it feels like I like it or not, really is sourced from Hashem, I need to be able to spend a few moments every single morning thinking about it. And a few moments it could be 10, it could be 5, it could be 1, it could be on your way to work. It's stopping and recognizing what's creating everything right now. What's creating me? What's creating my house? What's creating my children? What's creating my friends, job, work, colleagues? There is a creative energy. Hashem is recreating everything every single second. And it's so, so, so helpful. Because in the moment when I'm losing it, it's because I'm not remembering that it's all coming from Hashem. I'm desperately trying to control the situation. As soon as I recognize everything's coming from Hashem, I relax. There's somebody who's running the show. And while I won't understand why things have to be this way, I understand how I can actually deal with whatever life is throwing my way, as painful as it is. As much as I might not even like it, I could still intellectually, which will lead to emotionally recognize the source is good. Hashem wants something good from me. And it's that perspective itself that will actually eventually make it good. B'tayv hanerav nigla. So, I'm going to continue reading that when we were talking about the Beis HaMikdash, that v'tzarech levarai bekesef biyad hatzaref, that the silver needs to be refined, right? That's what the silversmith would do. Kol ma sheyesh taruves yaser, the more there's impurities mixed in, tzarech levarar, you have to purify it more. So the more we go through galus and get stuck by foreign concepts, foreign means not seeing the truth of Hashem's oneness, being convinced by the world that the world has its own existence, forgetting where we come from, what our neshama's true desire is, the more we need to daven, not the less. So maybe 10 generations ago, we could have gotten away with less, and 20 generations. The more we spend time until Mashiach comes, the more we need to higher the stakes. The more, it's not enough for us anymore to, mutter a few quick words of davening. We need to counteract the challenges that we're facing by upping our game and focusing on davening. The kol ma sheyesh taruves ra b'yeser, the more bad that's mixed in, sarach lahafrid al yedei eish yeser gadal. We have to separate it with a bigger fire, the chazak, a stronger one, b'tefila l'davek b'kainen. And that's really what davening is. I remember when I started learning different maamar about davening, I thought I was going to be learning about davening. And it turned out I was learning about life. It turned out this was giving me like a blueprint, not just how to daven, but what to think about davening and how that was going to impact everything else. And when I do face struggles and challenges, it's a game changer to think of, I also don't take the challenge so seriously. So even if a thought does pop into my head that I'm struggling with, it's like, oh, it's just you. Like the mashal of the Zaina. It's just a test. There's the source is Hashem, who is good. It helps me train my brain to look at the world differently. And when I forget, I feel the effect of forgetting. And so we're gonna end up circling back to our original question that we started off in the beginning. Why a snake? Why a copper snake? And why in the pole? Because Hashem was telling Moshe Rabbeinu, a snake didn't bite the Yidden and cause them to get sick. It came from Hashem. Snakes don't have any power. Nothing has any power over you. No person, place, or thing has any power over you. So the idea of the copper snakes on a pole was, where do these snakes come from? What's the source of the snake? The source of the snake is Hashem. The source of the snake is good. And that what's going to heal the Yidden from their plague, if they look up and recognize that the original source of the snake is Hashem and his total goodness, that is what's going to heal them. Just like Nachum Mishgamzu, that recognizing that the sand comes from Hashem. And Hanina ben Daisa recognizing that the same Hashem that could tell vinegar to burn could tell oil to burn. When we recognize the source of everything, that's our biggest and best chance to actually impact that things should get better. When someone is sick, when someone does something hurtful to you, when someone is struggling with shidduchim, with wanting a child, whatever it is that you're struggling with, gashmis or ruchnias, something that's internal, something that you tried so many years to fight it and you couldn't. Try this. Try meditating and being conscious of the fact that the source of this is good and that it's coming from Hashem. And like the copper snake that was on the pole, think about the source, that it comes from Hashem, which is all good. And even if I might not see that it's good, even, right, the same way like Penina or the Satan, it looks like it's not, but the source of it is really, really good. If I could really recognize and be in tune and in touch that this is like a counter pressure, this is here to make me stronger. And it could be I might not like it. It might be hard. But if I do accept that the source of this is good, then the good news is that will be the most healing thing for me. And just like the Yidden were actually healed when they recognized that everything came from Hashem, and that it was just a wake-up call to remind them of their source and who they really want to be and what a Yid really wants to be, so too, when I recognize that any of my challenges really come from Hashem, that actually makes it that the challenge should be disappeared and we should heal and have only open, revealed brachos in our lives. And I want to thank Hadassah for giving me the opportunity to learn a little bit with you all. And thanks for joining me today. I wish you a lot of hatzlacha on recognizing the source of good and it impacting your life in a very revealed way. Okay, Hadassah, we're finished here. If you're around. Hadassah, are you around? Hadassah.
Hello.
Hey, Misha's here. Hadassah, I just want to make sure you hear that I finished.
Ma.
Yeah.
Last time I was also captain. My Rebbe said I